Europe's largest football tournament is in full swing. Fans from China to Brazil are following the action as Germany hosts the UEFA Championship for the first time since reunification 35 years ago. The fans like the ample flow of beer, and they don't seem to mind an occasional cascade of rain. But can Germany live up to its reputation as a model of efficiency and organization? Delayed trains frustrate fans traveling to the matches and discourage Germans for whom such problems are just one more symbol of decline. Can a diverse and agile German team help lift a nation riven by doubts and divisions out of its crisis? Our question: Germany hosts Euro 2024, kicking its way out of the crisis? Hello and welcome to The Point. It's a pleasure to greet our guests. Guy Chazan heads the Berlin bureau of the Financial Times. Matthew Karnitschnig is Chief Europe Correspondent for Politico. And it's a pleasure to greet my colleague Dania Barcelona. She reports on sports and football for DW and is a player herself. She's played midfield for clubs in Germany, Norway, Spain, and Italy. Welcome. So, Daniel, let me start out by asking you, quite simply, is Germany a good host? What would you say is currently the mood here in the country?
Well, I've been lucky enough to go to a lot of the matches in the stadiums, and I've been in a lot of the fan miles. And I can tell you that what I've heard from the people who have come to Germany is that they're having a great time. They're really enjoying the fan zones that have been set up, the stadiums. Now, I have heard a lot of complaints about the train system, for example. Some of the Austrian fans, when there was a game in Berlin, they actually missed a lot of the match because there were train delays. In Gelsenkirchen, also the same kind of situations. So, in general, yes, but there are some complaints that I've definitely heard about it.
At the moment, you're from North America originally, and at the moment, the U.S. is currently hosting the Copa America. How would you compare the two tournaments?
Well, Copa America is the biggest tournament for North America and South America right now, and Euros is the biggest tournament for Europe. So, I mean, the Euros are a little bit bigger, I would say, in terms of viewership because Europe is really the center of football in the world. So all the players around the world, if you're growing up playing football, you want to play in Europe. So that's the goal. And Copa America, there are a lot of eyes from North America, but I would say more of the world is watching the Euros right now.
Matthew, before the tournament kicked off, the head of UEFA, which is the governing body of European football, said that this tournament would be sustainable and uniting, that it would bring the peoples of Europe together. And in fact, the continent could use some of that because it's been looking pretty fragmented lately. But do you think a football tournament really can achieve a goal that big?
I think it can divert people's attention from other things that are happening, and that can be very positive. Europe is obviously having a very difficult moment at the time, both politically and with the war in Ukraine. So I think a nice football tournament can show people maybe the sweeter side of life to a degree. Although I've heard some other people say, some Europeans tell me, they feel somewhat guilty about supporting their national team as strongly as they do because in their mind, that contradicts the European ideal of sort of European unity and all this kind of thing. So I think there is a bit of schizophrenia out there. But I think overall, it is a good thing.
How do you see it, Guy? You know, this is taking place just a 9-hour car drive from Lviv, from Ukraine itself. Is there a head-in-the-sand quality for you when you see fans here in Berlin celebrating and cheering while the war continues undiminished, not far away?
Well, it certainly has completely dominated the kind of news flow. You see it on a lot of the kind of big news sites like the BBC, for example. I mean, the Euro news really is up there, and the sort of the various aspects of the tournament are endlessly debated and chewed over, and the results. So you definitely have a sense that sort of international attention, or certainly European attention towards the war has diminished rather a lot, also towards the war in the Middle East. But in a way, you understand that. It's a kind of, you know, as someone who works in the media, you understand that there's sort of waves of interest and disinterest. And sometimes you saw it a bit with Gaza. I think, attention, public interest reaches saturation point and people are desperate for a bit of diversion and a bit of distraction. So I think it came at just the right time.
Daniel, Chancellor Schultz said right before the tournament began that he hoped it would bring good spirits to Germany, and certainly the nation could use some better spirits. You know the country pretty well. Are you seeing mood-boosting effects amongst Germans?
Yeah, definitely. I think that we're in a time right now where everything seems very negative. There's war, there's inflation, things are not going very well. And football is that chance that we have to come together, and it unites people from all walks of life. It's something that we all have in common. And you see this in the fan zones, for example. You see men, women, children, all different races, all different religions, all together, and they are cheering for the same thing. So that's very powerful in terms of uplifting people and bringing them together and showing that kind of unity. And that's the power that sport has, because at the end of the day, you think, okay, it's just a sport. It's not so controversial, And it brings people together and it uplifts the spirit. And now that being said, coming from North America, my first, impression of Berlin was people maybe weren't as friendly as I was used to. But here, now during the Euros, people are saying hi to you on the street. People will stop and have a conversation with you about, oh, did you see the game yesterday? What do you think? Who's going to win? So, yeah, the spirits are definitely uplifted from my perspective.
Thanks. We will drill a little bit deeper on the diversity issue and perhaps the slightly darker side that we've seen at some of the games. But let's first drill deeper on Germany's situation itself. And Germany has no title to defend as a nation, but it does have a reputation for efficiency, organization, and economic prowess that lately, at least, it's been struggling to live up to. Can the championship deliver a boost, not only for the beleaguered economy, but also for gloomy self-doubts?
I think it's very German. They organize everything super well. It's super friendly. You can go everywhere. It's really easy with public transportation. So, yeah, it's really good.
Super organized? The daily lives of Germans are quite different. Trains get cancelled, are overcrowded and delayed. Something some football fans have experienced, for instance, in Dortmund. It's badly organized. It's a bit chaotic. German efficiency seems a thing of the past. The economy has plummeted in international rankings. Germany lacks skilled workers. Digitalization is only creeping in. German taxes are really top tier, as is German bureaucracy. And then there's the coalition government, endlessly arguing about where budget cuts should be made. Things could hardly be worse, right?
So good. And I mean, look at this. This place is literally the best place I've ever been.
Can football lead Germany out of its crisis?
Matthew, there was a time when that actually did prove to be the case. I'm talking about 2006, what the Germans refer to as their summer fairy tale. When they hosted the World Cup championships, everything seemed to be going right. The national team won. And there was really, in a way, a new sense of patriotism in this country. Do you think this European championship can possibly deliver something like that?
I think it's going to be difficult because of everything else that's happening around the world and in Europe at the moment, especially the war. And at that time, there was an easiness, I think, not just in Germany, but around Europe about the state of the world. Things were, not as kind of controversial then in many respects as they are today. Also politically in Europe now we have this surge of the far right and the economy is not doing well. At that time, Angela Merkel had just recently become chancellor. Her predecessor had pushed through some very tough economic reforms. So Germany was coming out of sort of a tough economic period when it was referred to as the sick man of Europe. And that was sort of the beginning of the boom years right then. And some people attribute the summer fairy tale to that success. But I think that there's just too many problems, as we heard in the report right now, in the economy for this to have the same effect. Although I do think that it could give Germans, if they succeed and if this turns out to be seen as a success in Europe and around the world, maybe a little bit more confidence in their own ability to turn their country around.
That 2006 championship, Guy, of course, took place before the financial crisis, after the reunification of Germany. So, in a way, it was a golden moment. What's your take? Would you agree with Matthew that we're in a very different era now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. We were talking to Friedrich Merz yesterday, the leader of the Christian Democrats, and he's
presumptive nominee for chancellor of
exactly.
the opposition party.
And he said something really interesting, which was he thought that if Gerhard Schröder had called the elections in 2006 instead of 2005, he would have won, because the mood in the country after the summer fairy story was just so positive. It would have given a massive boost to his standing and to the SPD, which maybe some people might think is a bit far-fetched, but it's an interesting sort of hypothesis. There was a bit of an economic boost from the World Cup. And also there was a lot more spending, there was a lot more sort of confidence, consumer confidence. And also, as Matthew said, these reforms that Schröder had started were beginning to come to fruition. So you really saw it was a sort of real sweet spot, and it could have changed the course of German history, German political history, if he'd called the elections later.
That's a fantastic contingency to ponder. Daniel, following that summer fairy tale in 2006, which, of course, was a World Cup, as we say, not a European championship, Germany's GDP per capita rose by 1.5%. Typically, you don't see that kind of an uptick after a European championship. What's the difference in the scale, just purely economically, of these two different kinds of championships?
Well, the World Cup means that people will be coming to Europe from all over the world. So South America, Asia. And if you think you come from Asia to Europe, you're not going to stay for the weekend. You're going to stay for longer. You're going to make a trip out of it. You might go to different countries. You're going to see a little bit more of Germany. Now, for the Euros, and Germany's location is also pretty central, you can come to Germany for the weekend. You don't have to stay that long. Now, there will be, of course, a boom in the hospitality sector. Hotel prices are extremely high right now. People are going out to eat. They're going to bars. But you don't have, for the Euros, people really staying in Germany for 2 to 3 weeks, unless they're, the super fans who are following their teams every single place they go. But that's a smaller number of people. And in the World Cup, people really tend to save up for 4 years to make that big trip, and so they're spending a lot more money.
That's the tourism side. What about the infrastructure side? Do we see a lot more investment in conjunction with the World Cup, building new stadia, perhaps even transport and logistics, than you would within a European championship?
That really depends also on the country. For example, when the World Cup was in Qatar, they had to basically build everything new. So, of course, then there's a lot more infrastructure now. There's train systems, there's subways, new stadiums, everything. I mean, we saw this in Poland and Ukraine when they hosted the Euros. Poland really had to build up their infrastructure, and that had a really positive effect in the long term. Now, Germany already had a train system. They had these stadiums. So a lot of what they did was freshening everything up a little bit. But I think that, obviously, the scale is not as big as the World Cup, and Germany already had a lot of this infrastructure set, so they didn't have to go construct new.
Matthew, speaking of transport and logistics, and we saw the pictures in the report, has it exactly been working with that punctuality and efficiency that many people associate with Germany, the economic powerhouse that it used to be? Yeah. What's your assessment of the state of Germany today? Is the malaise that people feel justified by the hard facts of the economy?
Yes, I think it is. I think Germany's in a very tough spot, but there's a disconnect, I think, between the way people outside of Germany perceive the country and the reality of the country as Germans experience it every day, particularly economically. Germany is in a difficult situation. The economy's been stagnating for 5 or 6 years. There's no obvious path at the moment out of the situation that it's in right now. There are huge problems in the auto industry, for example. You can see that if you watch one of the games, because the main advertisers in the games are the Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD. Seems to be everywhere, and I think in past tournaments, it would have been the German car makers maybe, or German blue chip companies that would be advertising there. So there does seem to be a shift here. And the current government and the the German sort of titans of industry have yet to really find a path out of this very difficult situation that they're in.
Guy, that Chinese advertising, and it's not only BYD, the auto company, but other products as well. What does that tell us? An optimist might say, well, you know, maybe Germany's presenting such a great image to the world that we'll have lots more incoming Chinese direct foreign investment. But is that a bit too illusory?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's the case. I mean, actually, the latest figures show that foreign investment is kind of drying up a bit in Germany. It's at a sort of low levels which we haven't seen for many years, low levels. So, yeah, I agree with Matthew. I think that there's a sort of, there is a bit of malaise at the moment. You see it also in the political situation which we have right now. There's basically a kind of, the parties in the governing coalition have painted themselves into a kind of corner, and no one really knows how they're going to get out of it. So there's a sort of sense of political malaise as well as economic malaise.
Your newspaper actually wrote just before the tournament began in June that Europe's superpower is football, not politics. That's a direct quote. The question is how far that football superpower can go and what it can actually achieve for a national government in malaise, as you say, Germany certainly is, but also for a Europe that at the moment, you know, is fragmenting and facing a big right-wing surge.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a very, very dangerous point, really, in Europe's history, because we're seeing sort of the centrifugal the forces really intensifying and strengthening, and going back to that idea of unifying and unity, it's very difficult to really project unity when you're seeing Eurosceptic parties, for example, do so well in the European elections, and you have sort of nationalist governments now in Italy, in the Netherlands, and you know, who knows, possibly after Sunday in France as well. So it's a unique time really for Europe, and I mean, in a way, football can kind of paper over those cracks, but you know, the problems remain.
Germany's renowned economic institute, IW, says that the biggest driver of a potential Euro 2024 upturn of any kind is Germany's national team. Winning the title, that could deliver emotional and economic returns. Certainly the Agile team got off to a good start, but how far can they go, and how far are Germans ready to support an unusually diverse lineup?
Party in Berlin. Germans are celebrating their multicultural team, which includes Sané and Rüdiger, Musiala and Gundogan.
It's
a good mix of German society, so I think the team is great. Everyone is equal, and if the person represents Germany and can play really well, then we should be happy they are on our national team. But an opinion poll shows that 1 in 5 Germans would prefer it if the national team had more white players. Some politicians from the far-right AfD party reject the team, saying it is not German enough. The AfD recently became the second strongest German party in the European elections, with almost 16%. Non-German-born football fans have had different experiences at regular games here.
If you don't speak the German language, like you're gonna hear some assaulting words in German.
I've never seen any racist thing, and that's just me being fair.
How cosmopolitan is Germany?
Daniel, what's your answer to that? To what degree does this very diverse team actually represent this society as a whole?
I think it's a good representation of what society actually looks like now, because everybody doesn't look exactly the same. And also talking to a lot of different fans, they also say that. They say that this is a national team that the whole country can get behind, because I can look at the team and say, okay, there's someone who maybe comes from a different background like me, and then somebody else can say the same thing. And that's a great representation of what reality is now. And I think also that does translate into, you know, politics because people can get behind football. And you can also learn important lessons from football. You see that, Germany is working together for the goal of winning the Euros for the country and what that does to the country. And I think that that has the potential to then have a trickle-down effect. Now, it can be a catalyst, but it's important that, governments and society take this effect that the Euros has had and then use it in a positive way, because after a while, the effect will kind of be forgotten.
Nonetheless, Matthew, and I know you're an Austrian American, and we have heard fans from Austria, but also from Germany at some of the matches chanting slogans that are known as neo-Nazi slogans, foreigners out, Ausländer raus. How bad...
I wasn't there, by the way.
How bad is it, would you say? Is this just a very small minority of very vocal fans, or do you think we really do see in both countries, Austria and Germany, a deep problem with xenophobia and racism?
I think both could be true, and I think it is both. I think the people who are, yelling these kinds of insults are a minority. They're a loud minority, but there are deep problems in both countries with xenophobia, but not just in Austria and Germany. You're seeing it all over Europe. And I think in those two countries in particular, it's very closely connected to what we've seen with migration flows over the past decade or so. And those two countries in particular have taken in more refugees per capita than just about any other countries in Europe. And, there's a sense that they've been overburdened by people, and they've been overburdened by the rest of Europe, to say that, they are the ones who are left to deal with this influx of refugees, and that other countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, for example, aren't taking enough refugees. So there's a lot of resentment over this. I think there's also a lot of concern in Germany about the fact that many of the migrants, or most of them, are Muslims. And you saw this after the European election. There was a poll that really caught my eye that showed that over 60% of Germans were sort of unnerved, let's say, by the fact that Islam was becoming more prevalent in Germany, and that kind of tells you, where people's minds are.
Guy, it's sometimes hard to believe that this is still such an issue. Back in the early 2000s, there was an anti-xenophobia campaign in this country that showed an ad where you saw the German football team line up with the foreigners gone from it. It was basically a losing team. If they had put that team out on the pitch, they would have lost. Sometimes it's hard to believe that this is still such an issue. From your vantage point, also as a British citizen looking at Germany, would you say the country has a big problem?
Well, I think it does have a big problem, and you can see that by the phenomenal success of the AfD. I mean...
The right-wing party.
Yeah, the Alternative for Germany, which did incredibly well in the European elections, as we've heard. And it's an extraordinary phenomenon, the AfD, because we've seen in the last few months they've been embroiled in so many scandals, so much negative coverage in the press, and so many sort of outrageous sort of statements that their politicians have made, and it hasn't damaged them at all. So that is a sort of very good indication, I think, as to how deep this problem of sort of xenophobia and nationalism is in Germany. I mean, maybe it's wrong to call it a problem, but maybe just a phenomenon, that it is... that there is this sort of constituency in the German body politic, which is extremely xenophobic and anti-immigration.
But if I could just say one thing on that, because I don't think that it's really different in other parts of the world. And I think of the U.S., for example, and the debates that the U.S. is having over the migrants coming over the southern border. And obviously this is a big issue for Donald Trump. And I think in any Western country where you have a large influx of asylum seekers, of migrants coming in, you're going to see this kind of backlash. That's been the story of the last 25, 30 years. Last year, Germany took in, I think, over 300,000 migrants. And that is just a number that is very difficult for the country to withstand.
Thema, very briefly, is the diversity of the team manifesting itself in the way they play?
Yeah, I think definitely it is. And if you look historically, that's oftentimes how it works in football. The team kind of represents society and how they play. Right now, this team is more fluid, more interchangeable, more fun.
Is it going to win on Friday night against Spain?
I think so.
Oh, wow. Okay. Who's going to be the European champion?
I think
Matthew?
Germany will be.
England.
Okay, I
have to say that, don't I?
I sense some national partisanship here. Thank you very much to all of you for being with us today. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. Please look at our YouTube channel and tell us what you think. See you soon.